Welcome, guys. We are back for another episode of The Lock-In. We are joined by a very special guest this week. He's a bit of an online poker OG, Sunday Million winner. He's also got some live stripes. He's won the LA Poker Classic. He has final tabled a WCOOP main back in the day. A fantastic writer, a retired podcaster, a former Poker Stars pro. Welcome, Shane Shaniac Schleger.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
So great to have you, Shane. You have a little story about your own podcasting career, or maybe another podcast idea maybe that you were thinking of.
Well, actually, yes, but let me tease. Actually, I'm actually going to be launching something like a podcast pretty soon.
Ooh.
For the cannabis consumer. It's going to be a cannabis weed-related podcast. But yeah, once upon a time, my friend David Rowan and I, who used to play on Poker Stars as Hydro 420, we were going to do a podcast about podcasts and call it "We Can Edit That Out," because everyone on every podcast, there's always a moment where like the guest will be like, "Oh, should I say this?" And the host will always be like, "Don't worry, we can edit that out." But before this, you told me we can't edit anything out, so I'm going to watch what I say.
Yeah, we can't edit stuff out here, or if we do have to, it's very expensive. So please don't cost us money.
Expensive how? You have to bring in like a special teams unit to do the editing? Or?
Exactly. We have to hire special people who can work with video. I only know how to do audio.
Okay.
Well, look, before we get to some topics that maybe has more crossover between all of us, it would be remiss of me not to mention a little bit of Chip Race Run Good. Who would have believed it? On the last show, 2 weeks ago, Jack Hardcastle charmed us, of course, with his funny stories and his tepid attempts to give out about people in the UK poker community. Well, he's got even more reason to lord it over us all now, Dara, doesn't he?
Yeah, Jack took down WPT Montreal, which, like every other live event at the moment, took place online. Difficult to know what the exact description of geographical places these things actually means, but yeah, huge score for Jack. I believe it was over 400. Is that right? I'm actually losing count now of all Jack's scores.
I know, he got 280k only a few weeks ago, and he cashed for 448k. That was the first prize on a final table that included Ray and Chamas, Dan Shack, and of course Upeshika De Silva, who seems to be making a habit of coming ninth on these high-profile final tables. As you said, Dara, it was the Montreal WPT. Jack did tweet, "I'm so good I managed to win the WPT Montreal without leaving my house."
Yeah. When Jack was going deep, he sent me a message saying, "Can I just play for 400k every 2 weeks, please?" He's on a pretty sick run at the moment. He's one of the people who's definitely benefited the most from the pandemic because he's more comfortable, let's say, online than live. So it's been good for him that all these events have moved online.
Not to interject, but they did run a live WPT in Florida. My guy Ronnie Barta cashed for like 600k. He chopped it up.
Nice little super spreader event there in Florida. That's pretty much all old people. That's nice to hear.
Yeah, it's like I wonder, like, does America realize there's a pandemic going on at the moment?
I'll tell you, I mean, I don't know if we're diving right into this, but my only comment is that it's bizarre that, in certain cities, first of all, it's different from county to county out here, even in California, in terms of the way people approach these regulations. In San Francisco, everyone, for whatever reason, is wearing masks outside on wide open streets. In Orange County, you'll hardly find anyone wearing a mask except in a store. And then, so it's like, I doubt the people in San Francisco walking around with masks on realize that there's people playing a poker tournament in Florida or in Bally's. It's just very interesting to me, the sort of non-overlapping realities that are taking place.
Interesting is such a lovely non-political word. We'll just stick with interesting, I think, for this now.
It's a go-to. I mean, yeah. I'm sure Ronnie Barta's not mad. He won $600,000 by showing up in person. So just to correct the idea that all the WPTs are taking place online, and to give big ups to Ronnie.
Yeah. No, fair play. Well, look, we want to cover a couple of these grudge match challenges. Galfond, what a legend he is. 3 for 3 now in challenges after Chance bowed out last week. 5 months, 25k hands, 730k to the good. Another Galfond challenge in the books. Dara, are there enough superlatives for Phil Galfond at this point?
No, it's incredible. I mean, if you remember how far behind he was at one point in his first challenge, and everybody was writing him off as sort of over the hill. He can't hack it in the solver age and so on. Obviously, neither of us are PLO experts, but from listening to PLO experts, for example, yesterday on the DNeg's Polk stream, somebody was talking about how at the start Phil was genuinely rusty and he was making a lot of mistakes. But his game just shaped up really, really fast, and he's now absolutely crushing it. It's a remarkable turnaround. It just shows, like, when you have that kind of poker brain, once you apply it yourself, what's possible. It's great to see, because there's always a question mark, let's say, over people like him who reach the top and then sort of step back to do other stuff. The people who come afterwards often tend to dismiss them, saying, well, they operated in an easier period. But essentially, he's like the heavyweight champ who's basically come back, and now he's knocking out taking on all comers.
Yeah, it is just so impressive. I have to say, it's also impressive what a tremendous ambassador he is for the game, and never really fails in that role. Doug said on his stream last night that when thinking about who would be the perfect person to arbitrate his match with Daniel, the sort of referee, if you like, he thought, well, it's weird, kind of weird actually when you think about it, but he's choosing his biggest business competitor, because obviously Run It Once would be the main challenger to Upswing's domination of that training space.
Yeah. Although it's the other way around. Run It Once was obviously there first, and Upswing sort of came on the scene. But yeah, I mean, it's a real. Phil is universally loved. There's nobody who doesn't like Phil Galfond, and apparently he was streaming yesterday when the shenanigans kicked off between DNeg's and Polk sent him a DM asking him to arbitrate, and because he was streaming, he didn't get it. So Polk literally went into his Twitch stream and started badgering him, saying, "Check your DMs. We need you fast." He's a man of many hats, and he wears all of those hats very well.
Have you been following these challenges, Shane?
Well, I'll tell you, I was, and then it's like when actual life comes up and you start having to do things, and you're not just like sitting in front of a computer following other people's high stake matches.
Actual life, what's that? What's that? What's actual life? I forget. Actual.
I think they still have that in America, David.
No, not necessarily. It's just something that got thrust on me in the last month, and I just didn't have the opportunity to keep up on it. But I take an interest, let's put it that way. But I'm curious, has Galfond lost any of his challenges yet?
No. 3 for 3 so far. Yeah.
And he was so far. I mean, he was so far behind in the first one, Veni Vidi, that people had more or less written him off and saying he was going to quit.
No, that one I saw pretty much start to finish, and then he's had like 3 or 4 since then. And I was kind of I was keeping track of the one he had against Chance, but then I feel like it got upstaged by the Negreanu Polk thing, and it kind of fell off the radar a little bit. I don't know. I mean, my thing is, I can't imagine playing for those kind of stakes when you have like newborn children. Like, I give nothing but respect to all the poker players raising kids. It's just that's something I'm not going to be doing with poker money or otherwise. But so I've been briefly keeping track. What needed to be arbitrated? Like,
okay, so I'm going to give the full story. So it sort of all leads up to the point that Dara mentioned there. I am going to back up a couple of weeks because there's been a bit of a roller coaster, it's fair to say. Doug had been up about $1 million. Daniel sort of pulled it back over the course of about a week to get it to about 650k. Doug then had a huge session. I actually got to commentate on that one. He won about 300 and something K and got it back over the milli mark. That was a really fun stream because it was Doug tweeting a lot. He was showing his bluffs. He was sort of doing little dances when he crossed the 1 million mark and sending them out on social media. So for the lulz, as Doug likes to say, it was very good entertainment. It's got to be said, at the interview, the post-match interview, right after that one, Daniel was really dejected and sort of cowed and was kind of a very diminutive, beaten down figure, I have to say. But he put his big boy pants on the next day or maybe 2 days later and put together the biggest session of that challenge so far, 400k plus. And that really got him back in the mix, sort of took a big chunk out of Doug's winnings, sort of put Doug in a spot where he couldn't coast anymore. And he was actually within reach again, hypothetically. So, definitely uncomfortable for Doug. with the results that on the very next session that they played a few days later, Doug started limping, which obviously had a couple of reasons behind it. One, it was a strategy he was keeping in his back pocket. I think something he'd been working on as a way to carve out a little bit of extra EV. It's obviously also got the added benefit for him of, in the context of a challenge and the sort of ICM that is created by a challenge like that, when you have side action, it lowers variance and makes it much more difficult for Daniel to catch him. Actually, on that, Dara, because there is a sort of a weird ICM in play here, I thought maybe you could explain that better than I just did, and the impact it has upon that challenge.
Yeah, we talked about this yesterday, and I speculated that this was probably the primary reason for Doug deciding to do it, which is just to lower variance. When you have a lead of 600k, you want to lower variance to the point that even if you run really badly, your downswing will be less than the 600k, so you end up winning the challenge and therefore winning all the side bets. So it makes perfect sense to try and lower your variance in any way. And as all tournament players know, one of the ways you lower variance is to exercise pot control from the start. So you limp more, your bet sizes in general are smaller. And yeah, essentially it is exactly ICM. It's interesting to see ICM applied to this, which is a pure cash game challenge, but because of the side action, and the side action is significant, it's really important that Doug maximizes his or minimize the chance that DNAs can land a lucky punch, as it were. And you know, another 400k session, for example, and DNAs will be right back in the mix. So limping makes perfect sense from that perspective, reducing your variance.
Can I ask you a question? I guess this was confusing me too, because I thought it was just mostly a straight challenge, unlike the Galfond stuff, which had these side bets built in. This is, I mean, I didn't realize, like, you know, any win in the Negreanu Polk challenge mattered so much. I thought, you know, Doug was just trying to completely just maximize dollar EV all the way down.
That's
so
what you said.
The side bets are external. So Daniel and Doug don't have side action, but they both have side action with other people.
Okay, so it's, I mean, Doug is still self-interested in winning. Like if he wins by $10, it's still really good. It's still really good.
Huge, yeah. And also his friends, I believe a lot of his friends have side action. And the side action, I mean, we probably shouldn't say an exact amount. There's been speculation, but it's extremely significant. So like, it's far more important that he locked that up than, say, win an extra 100,000 or 200,000 from Negreanu. By playing a different strategy. So it's extremely important to him and his circle that he retain the lead. And he was very, I mean, Doug is always very honest about this. He talked about it last night in his post-match interview. He said that he had to play in such a way that even if he runs in the bottom 5 or 10% of universes, because of variance reduction, it wouldn't wipe out his earlier wins. He also said that essentially he's trying to, like, they're only about 5,000 or 6,000 hands from the end now. So if he maintains his lead, let's say, over the next 2,000 to 3,000 hands, there's no way Negreanu can get back in the last 3,000 hands, and then the handcuffs come off again and he can play normally. But at the moment, he's kind of at that inflection point where he's aware that with 6,000 hands left, if he ran insanely badly, which is always possible, Galfond ran insanely badly at the start of his challenge with Veni Vidi. So therefore, he's essentially trying to take those 3,000 hands out and lower the variance. I think the other reason he did it, and I think it's also a very good reason, is just to throw a spanner in the works. Negreanu was not very good at heads up when they started, it's fair to say, but he has improved immeasurably, and he's actually playing very well now. So Polk's edge over him is nothing like it was at the start. But Daniel, as is very clear from some of his post-match interviews, Daniel is a kind of a monkey see, monkey do learner rather than a learn from fundamentals. So Daniel has essentially assimilated now this strategy based on the way Doug has been playing so far. So by Doug switching it up and switching to a completely different strategy, Daniel now has to go back to the drawing board and learn a completely new strategy.
Sorry, go ahead. I mean, I want to interject some kind of defense for Negreanu here, just to bring it back to what you said about Phil Galfond. I mean, just before I agree, I co-signed the monkey see, monkey do observation. You know, let's say for all intents and purposes, Negreanu has been a really great poker player his whole career, or my the entire time I've been in. It's funny actually. I have a friend who it's still the greatest point of pride in his poker career is like he beat Negreanu heads up in like some $500 tournament at the Taj Mahal, like 2002. But I mean, look, to go back to Galfond, and my theory is more like there is something intangible about really good poker players that's greater. It's greater than the current trend in the game. Like I've always said that about, let's say, JC Tran in tournaments. Like he might not be the best technical player, but there's something he brings to his game that's like a presence of mind that he's really making a lot of like good or adjusting really well to the table or making good decisions. That he's never going to be considered, let's say, a Jason Kuhn, but I do believe JC Tran is a sort of player who will always like put up results. And Negreanu is like a very good player who actually understands poker theory quite well. And he might not be on the cutting edge of the game today by the standards that, Doug was at when they started, but I think it's fair to say there's some combination of Daniel doing the monkey see, monkey do thing, and also incorporating that with some really raw poker talent.
There's no doubt he has massive poker talent, and Doug even acknowledged this last night. Doug, or actually, well, I think Negreanu said Doug had acknowledged it, which is that Negreanu has this sort of natural poker talent. Let's say you put him in a spot, he plays a certain number of hands, and he intuitively will work out a very good strategy. Whereas Doug doesn't really have that. Doug, by his own accounts, is a product of the lab. He didn't have any real natural poker talent.
Which I will say, given that dynamic, to me, it is and was insane that Negreanu took on this challenge. I mean, I don't understand, like, the publicity EV versus like his just raw negative. It's just taking on the best person in his chosen format is pretty ballsy, I guess, but pretty insane too. I don't quite understand it still.
Yeah, no, I think it's really important to give Daniel his dues on this stuff. Like, it might be a bad business decision, or maybe in the bigger picture things, it's a very good business decision because it keeps him in the limelight during lockdown where he can't be playing live poker. His sponsors maybe are quite happy about this, and it's part and parcel of their content output. So there could be a kind of a myriad of reasons there. But yeah, you have to take your hat off to exactly what Dara said a moment ago and has been reiterated by Doug a few times now, which is that Daniel has improved tremendously fast and is obviously really taking his study seriously now and has got good. But that's what makes it interesting for me, that he was still vulnerable to the idea that this limping strategy, in his mind, his initial reaction was, oh, this is just bad. You're giving up EV now to me to lower variance. He couldn't understand that it was possible to construct balance ranges with a limping strategy. And that was something that Doug was aware of. It's something that people like Dominic Nietzsche have talked about a lot over the years. It's something that the very best players, Linus, Berry, all these guys incorporate and do a little bit. They don't play exclusively that way, but they do mix it in, and they mix it in at times where they feel like it's particularly advantageous. So that was interesting. And Daniel kind of went straight away, oh, you're no good. And then Veni Vidi actually tweeted at him, which I thought this was kind of cool, bringing the whole conversation full circle to some degree. He said, Doug is about lowering variance and allowing yourself to limp will add EV to his pre-flop strategy. I'm curious to see how well you'll respond to the new strategy. And overall, I'm very impressed by how you've gotten better at heads up no limit in such a short space of time. So again, I think Daniel was kind of getting maybe feedback right after his initial interview of like, actually, you're not making sense here. This is a legitimate strategy. This is actually good poker from Doug. And you have to maybe twist the narrative again. You can't be saying like it's Grandpa Doug, being cowardly and limping in. It actually has more merit. And I think he, obviously his coaches at least explained that to him since.
We've seen some famous limping strategies at like the World Series final table.
Bill Collins was the first famous one. Yeah. The first year of November 9. Phil Collins, who hadn't limped in his entire career up to that
that's
point,
what I was thinking.
Went away and came back with Olympic strategy, which completely threw everybody at that final table. Yeah.
Although I remember at the time someone. Go ahead.
No, you finish your point there, Shane.
No, See, I remember him coming out with that limping strategy, and it sort of being shocking or whatever to people, or surprising. And then someone claiming that he had that limping strategy all along online, or I thought maybe Ruthless had claimed that. I don't know, but it was memorable.
It's possible.
So, I mean,
it's possible. It's possible online. It was certainly new live.
Right.
Because
you know who played a really sick limping strategy, and not just at final tables. I mean, really, like Berkey. When I played with him many years ago at a World Series event, I mean, he played what I considered at the time completely unique style to everyone else in the field. He was like limping a large percentage of hands and just taking it from there.
Do you remember an online guy called the Battler?
Yes. Well, I remember him very well.
He was absolutely insane. Like Fullering, he used to VPIP north of 80%. But it was pretty much all limps. And he had the limp re-raise, the limp re-shove, every bag in the arsenal. He was by far the hardest reg to play against, in my opinion.
Really was.
I don't remember him playing against him specifically, but I remember when I played with Berkey that time in the live game, I was just like really impressed and like, frustrated, like confounded. It's just like generically a frustrating strategy when you're just used to this sort of like raised 3-bet, 4-bet dynamic. And now someone is like completely changing the rhythm of the game with limps. And I don't know if that's directly pertinent to what we're talking about, but.
Well, before we get back to it, I do remember the Battler showing up at an Irish Open circa 2011. And to be fair, Dara, yourself, myself, and I think John O'Croop might have been the only people in the room who knew who he was. And we were fanboying over him.
You were absolutely the same fanboy. Yeah, he had such an incredibly unique style. I believe subsequently he got a bracelet. And
is he no longer battling?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen him in recent years. So, yeah, and talking to him as well was really funny because he was obviously one of these like great intuitive geniuses, because he would say like, I can't really explain what I do or why it seems to work, but it does work. He was the original, but he used to do a lot of stuff that people thought was just mental, but actually now in the era of the solvers, you can see it's perfect. Like he was the guy who would limp pocket eights under the gun, and then when somebody raised him behind, he'd reshove, and everybody would go like, "What the hell is this? Like people don't do this with anything other than aces or kings." But yeah, it's.
I mean, this is a good way to still to parse this topic of like solving versus just playing beastly. I think there's it converges there. Like there's people who just play that great intuitive style. And I think that winds up doing enough stuff similar to the solver, or maybe that's even, that they're onto something before people have run those sims. I just know, like, I think we talked about it last time, but I know guys who have never opened a solver and they, I think, play pretty well against solver heavy players.
Yeah, for sure. It's like there's a lot of people, and I coach some guys who have never used a solver, but when you ask them a spot and they tell you what they think, and then you look at the solver output, it matches very well. So they kind of have a good intuitive sense. But the first game I really loved in my life is chess, and I've only ever beaten a chess grandmaster once. And it was nothing to write home about because it was a simultaneous display, which means he had to play 30 people at the same time. But I kind of realized at the age of 20 or 21, whatever I was, that if I just play my standard opening, Roy Lopez as white or the Sicilian as black, he's going to run over me because he has such a huge advantage over me in that stuff. So I deliberately chose an opening that nobody ever plays called Grobs. It's a horrendous opening from a theoretical point of view, and therefore you never see it at the top level. But the good thing about Grobs is, first of all, you never see it at the top level, so he had no preparation in it. And the second thing is, some of the most obvious or immediately obvious counter moves are actually bad. There are some fairly well disguised traps in the opening. So if you just do the obvious looking move, you're often making a mistake. And because I thought, well, he's playing 29 other people at the same time, so he's not going to have very much time to think about this. And I think Dominic, we mentioned Dominic earlier. Dominic does a kind of a similar thing in poker where he uses weird sizings just to throw people away from what they're used to. Like everybody knows how to defend against the min raise now. Everybody knows how to defend against the 33% c-bet, etc. So Dominic is the guy you'll see 3.5xing off the 14 big blind stack, and he's still folding some of the time when he's shoved on. But he's put in the work to know how to balance those ranges. It might be very slightly less EV than the standard sizings, but he's kind of counting on people playing badly against it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so fascinating as well, is when you take your villain down to a part of the game tree they're not used to being in, and there's all sorts of new opportunities for exploitation. I do want to bring us, kind of catch us up to the present, if you like, because we're almost there where you said, Dara, of last night's session. Doug obviously went to battle with Daniel last night, and Daniel, having proclaimed that Doug could, quote, not beat him with the limping style. He called Doug a grandma. He said that Doug was toothless. He said that he was cowering. Daniel took the unexpected approach to come back for the next session and stall every hand for 20 seconds, every street, so that he can buy himself more time to learn the counter strategy, which is obviously something he discovered is actually quite complicated and something worth learning.
Wait, so I was confused about this because I caught wind of this like while I was like literally driving on, like 5 hours, and I'm reading Twitter occasionally when I stop, and he chose to stall. I mean, I saw Dan Smith befuddled that he would, trash the watchability of this. So you're saying like he would take those extra 20 seconds to try to think about things more clearly because he's not using any kind of.
No, essentially what he was doing was he was trying to minimize the number of hands that would be played, because they're playing for two to 2.5 hours. So if he's max stalling every decision, they're only going to play 30 or 40 hands in those 2 to 2.5 hours.
Can't he declare? Can't they say let's take a 2-day break? Can't he say, or that's built in that they have to play a certain number of sessions per week?
No. Well, that's the bit that I couldn't understand, because I kind of thought, well, like, why not just call Doug and call in a sick day or something? I'm sure Doug would be like, yeah, okay. And that would have bought him the whole weekend to do a bit more study or whatever he wanted. But in the end, he sort of decided he was going to do this. And I think he had multiple reasons for it. One, I think he was now working off new charts. So he has his opening ranges on an iPad. He's studying them. He's now got new ones.
I thought they couldn't use charts.
I know Daniel backed on that one. He loves charts now. He wants charts. As many more charts are better.
I think his coach has explained that it was going to be more to his advantage as the less experienced heads up player, to be able to refer to charts.
When was that decided? At the beginning?
right after he complained about it.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, that complaint lasted about 2 days, I think, and then he backtracked and was like, okay, yeah, charts are great, actually. I love charts. But no, so he's studying these charts. He's obviously got his 2.4x charts for when they're deeper. He's got his 2.2x charts for when they're starting stacks, and now he's got his limping charts for when Doug decides to limp button. So he's trying to figure out what he's meant to do, and he's legitimately maybe able to make an argument that it takes him 20 seconds to scan through all that stuff, because it's not stuff that he knows route, like he might have almost route the ranges. The part that didn't make any sense, and in fairness, it's what Galfond spotted immediately when he was called in for arbitration, was he was also taking this time on the button when he was first act and he was first in, and he was pretty much raising 100%. So that didn't make any sense. These 20 seconds seemed to be utterly egregious. And after Doug sort of had a bit of a fucking fit over it and was really pissed off and went into almost every stream on the internet that was covering the match, he basically convinced Galfond, Galfond, I'm sure, being the arbiter, independently came to this place where he said, well, how about you speed up on the button, and if you need to take your 20 seconds, in response to Doug's limps, fair enough. Which Daniel reluctantly said, okay.
So sorry. Doug requested some intervention or some arbitration?
Yeah. He felt like he was breaching etiquette to the point of angle shooting, or to the point of kind of like, yes, it's within the rules, but it's really dirty. And it's also kind of implied within it is like, if you continue doing the limping strategy, I'm going to continue doing the stalling strategy. And Doug hates poker and wants this challenge over in 2 weeks. And I suppose the idea would be then, well, this could actually take like 2 months instead.
Gotcha. So how long did the stalling episode last?
It's about half an hour, Dara, would it have been?
No, I think it was about an hour. I felt like it was about an hour, and I do think Daniel had a couple of different reasons. I think the reason of having new charts is definitely legitimate, and he made the point in his post-match interview that even when he has an obvious decision and he knows what the answer is, he still has to take 20 seconds because he can't convey to Polk that he has a hand which is obvious. When he has these other spots where he's taking 20 seconds to find the right part of the iPad. He also did quite an amusing demonstration of like what he called old man Negreanu, messing around with all this technology, being very confused. I mean, he's only 46, so it's a little bit thin.
Is he still in his recliner? No, but I mean, 46 he should actually.
Desk, I think
46 is actually young.
Yeah.
I don't know how old you guys are, but Barry Greenstein claims that a poker player comes into his prime in his 40s. On one of his marathon Joe Ingram podcasts, like there's 2 4-hour podcasts with Barry Greenstein, which is actually completely worth listening to. I listened to one on the drive out to the World Series one year. But
don't
Barry,
be doing other people's podcasts on this show, fuck's sake.
Yeah, okay. We said we weren't going to edit anything out, but that's definitely getting edited out. But
it's a community, guys. It's symbiotic. The rising tide, all ships rise.
Sure, yeah.
But Barry did, I'm going with the philosophy that a poker player comes into his prime in his 40s. So I don't want to. We cannot give Daniel the old man pass.
There's hope for me yet, Dara. I'm not 40 yet.
Are you not? Wow, that's
fuck you! I can't believe you. Such an own goal. Why did I say that?
Yeah, but to return to Daniel's motivation, I also think, I mean, one of Daniel's great skills is he kind of understands people's psychology really well, and he really realized that this would really get under Doug's skin. And I mean, Doug pretty much proved that. I mean, I used to play with a guy live, and you actually run into a few of these guys. They play insanely slow, and part of the reasoning is it just annoys everybody, and people make mistakes when they're annoyed. Will Cassou, for example, is an incredibly slow player, even when he's not stalling, which is not very often. But like I watched his heads-up match, for example, big tournament he took it down online recently, and it's the slowest heads-up match I've ever seen because he was taking a minute on almost every decision. And I think part of it is just to annoy people. It gets people out of the thing. People used to playing at a certain flow, and if you play really, really slow, that annoys them. And so I think that was part of it. And also it was just like, it was kind of a fuck you to him. And well, now you've made me learn this new strategy and I'm going to have to go off and learn that. So I'm going to mess things up for you too, buddy.
I mean, that's kind of the whole thing in a nutshell. It does annoy, like that strategy would work against me. Like it would make me play worse. Maybe that's something to think about the next time I encounter such a player, and just to work on my breathing or whatever. So it's a sort of like, it is a time-honored thing in gambling and poker, this sort of like Amarillo Slim type of manipulation or just, meta game, head game bullshit. Then I get, so I don't know. I'm torn between thinking it's sort of fair play on Daniel's part in this case, because Doug spent 3 to 5 years getting under Daniel's skin to the point where he induced Daniel to agree to the worst heads up situation ever. And I think, whatever Daniel uses to counter that at this stage in the game is probably fair. And look, everyone having a tantrum all day on Twitter is good for the game. It's good for the community. So I'm indifferent.
I feel like I just need to issue a little PSA, a little public service announcement there, because you mentioned Will Cassou and his tanking and his stalling. And if you are playing him live, I would recommend that you, even if he is getting under your skin, don't look away. If you've got chips in front of you, definitely don't look away. That's the most important thing. Look, finally, I just want to put a little nugget of hypocrisy here, because I couldn't help but do a little bit of research when Daniel started the tanking business, because I remembered a video where he was calling clock on somebody on the final table, last 2 tables. And I remembered a blog he wrote. So I dug out the blog, and in the blog, he was going at Jordan Christos, who had kind of become the face of egregious tanking at the time. And he said, in the future, when I call the clock on you repeatedly, this is him talking to Christos, it isn't personal. I'm just doing what's best for me, the other players at the table, the poker community, the broadcast, the fans, and ultimately you. So Daniel Negreanu, one of the biggest and most vocal anti-egregious stalling people in the world, decided that, stalling finally had a
time out though.
For him.
Time out. It's unfair to a degree, because this is a heads-up challenge and it's his challenge and he can do whatever the hell he wants. Whereas in a multi-table tournament, you are sort of affecting you're affecting the vibe of the whole tournament, and that's that can be a detriment to recreational players enjoying it, and that's a problem for the game. So now I'm not taking it out on Jordan Christos, who, by the way, probably experiments with untraditional open sizes even more than Dominic Nitschke. He's like the guy that tanks for 30 seconds, and then like raises 20x under the gun or whatever. He's known for doing crazy things. In other words, I'm trying to advocate for Daniel against your unrelenting disgust for him by saying this is not relevant to his hypocrisy on the tanking issue. That's all. Go on.
The only thing I would say,
community in a broadcast and some fans watching, so some of those things are still there.
Sure, yeah. The only thing I would say is that that hour when that tanking was going on was excruciating to watch. So I don't think
you didn't have to watch it though.
Sorry,
I was in Santa Cruz having pizza. Like, it didn't bother me at all.
Yeah, but I think a lot of the way this challenge was sold was, well, this is a way of sort of getting interest in poker again, and it has done a very good job in that. A lot of recreational players are really exercised by this, but
I mean, the idea that Negreanu being a pain in the ass, like for one session, undermines the value that this has to the community is, that's not true. In fact, it's generated 20 minutes of discussion already, or however, we've been here a while. I think, basically they're doing a good job with the showmanship. Like, they're somehow creating this actual tension.
I think that's irrefutable, to be honest. It's a soap opera, and we're all enjoying it. We're all talking about it. So
and especially considering how little impact this has on our lives. On my life, this is like two guys who have a ton of money, obviously, to gamble. Gambling for stakes that I would never gamble for. Okay, but it's okay, right? That's great. I mean, and I have a couple of friends who might have side bets, and I want them to win. So it has a minor personal impact for some people, but I'm paying credit to both of them, in a way, or even to Daniel. I mean, Daniel is essentially taking the worst of it for a big moment in poker publicity, and that's cool, and Doug is really just finally seeing the end game of this 4-year needling campaign or whatever it is, however long it's been since the billboard and the shirt and Negreanu has felt bullied by Doug. I don't think Doug is a bullying presence. I think he's more of a humor driven kind of guy, but he's a ball buster, and I don't know. It's just, this is all good. This is all, it's pretty amazing that it actually wound up in an actual battle for a lot of money.
It really is. And I think that's the one thing we can all agree on, and maybe draw a line under it there, is that it's excellent popcorn TV.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we mentioned that the Galfond challenge kind of got overshadowed once this started, and it's the old thing in boxing that people much rather watch a villain than a squeaky clean hero. People are not so much rooting for Polk or DNeggs as against Polk or DNeggs, depending on which side of the divide they're on. And that's a really strong motivator. And the level of comments you can see people are really emotionally invested in this on one side or the other. I mean, they're almost a perfect couple in the sense that Daniel is always throwing stuff out there and bending narratives and throwing new narratives out. And Doug is very good at responding to this humorously. So it's been excellent entertainment to watch.
Yeah, fair play.
Doug had to invest in a T-shirt, in a billboard. This was a multi-year thing to induce this action.
Yes, years in the making. Well, look, we come now to unfortunately something that keeps cropping up in our industry. We sort of say how we would like to not shine too much of a light on these kinds of stories, but it is also important that we do pay attention to these stories when they crop up. There has been another multi-accounting scandal. Winamax Pro, so quite high profile, Ivan Deyra, won the 2K Super High Roller at the recent Winamax series for €83,000. The only problem was he was playing on his dad's account, which, for anyone out there who doesn't know, that's not allowed. That's not okay. In the face of overwhelming evidence, I believe Dara confessed pretty quickly. His contract with Winamax obviously terminated. And he released a public statement saying that his punishment was, and I quote, heavy, very heavy, but also logical and understandable. I don't know if anything has been lost in translation here. He went on, how could I have been so naive or oblivious? For days and nights now that follow, I am searching within myself to dig into the reasons for this unforgivable and serious act. He laughably suggested, actually, that it was an innocent decision to try out a new screen name because he felt like he'd been losing on Winamax for quite a while, and maybe it was because he didn't get to change his alias once in a while. Doesn't really explain playing the same tournament a second time, Ivan. I hate to kind of point to something obvious there. Dara, on the spectrum of cheating, how bad is multi-accounting?
I mean, I mean, there's different types of multi-accounting as well. Like if you're playing 2 accounts at the same time on the same table, that's obviously a lot different from entering the same tournament twice. But I mean, it's not even multi-accounting. If you're playing, even if you'd only played on his dad's account and he hadn't played on his own account, it would still be wrong because people would assume they're playing against his dad with his dad's stats rather than this baller. This is always an issue online, obviously, and it plays right back into the idea that recreational players have that they get cheated all the time online. I have to say though, this is why I love the French. Like even when they're embroiled in a scandal, the way they express themselves is so wonderfully innovative. It reminded me of Cantona that time when he talked about seagulls following trawlers, and in response to him kicking a fan in the crowd. It was props to Ivan. What he did is pretty wrong. It's at the lower level of it's at the less serious end of cheating, but the statements he put out were very entertaining.
I mean, do you want my 2 cents on this?
Sure,
definitely.
I mean, that's more just like a case study in like obliviousness, and just like it doesn't seem if we're gonna take his sort of apology at face value, it sounds like it wasn't malicious, but like naive isn't the right word either. It's like a benign form of being unethical, but also just like it's so impossible to imagine a professional poker player operating under that set of assumptions that he claimed and somehow not thinking it through. It's like, I mean, like part of his statement did ring true. It's like he really does have to think like, how could I be so dumb? Like he really has to think about that. And like the ethical breach is almost like a product of his being dumb, not necessarily of ill intent. You know, and yeah, look, I was thinking of literally one time I multi-accounted. I mean, I'll come out with this because it was back when it was.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were about to make news here. Go on, please continue.
No, it's not news. I mean, I'll tell you, it lasted like 3 hands. You know, it was back when, before the the big Z Justin scandal broke out. There was a glitch, you know, there was an exploit that was getting passed around where you could open 2 instances of party poker and play 2 different accounts easily. So I did that in like one tournament. I opened up a second window, and whether I had busted already or just decided to enter a different account, it immediately just felt like, like wrong. And, you know, it wasn't something I was going to pursue. And this was before it became apparent that a lot of people were using that bug, and Z Justin became the most famous sort of perpetrator of that. So, I mean, I guess where I'm going with this is, you know, I feel like I am an ethical player, and just like the Rex, I feel like I'm probably getting cheated here and there. But I don't know. I don't have too much like patience, I guess, for people who are like, oh, I had no idea that this was wrong. It's like, you know, it's like I'll just confess that the one time I flirted with that, I knew immediately it was wrong, and I never attempted to do that again.
I'm glad to see that your reaction was and multi-accounting didn't become your drug of choice. That's good. It's
no, I mean, yeah, I just, yeah, you know, a more interesting question was like, someone was like, if you were given if you wound up with a super user account on UB, would you have used it? You know, and at the time I told my friend, I don't think I would have. I think I would have felt just too yucky. But, you know, I don't know. It's actually more, it's like, if you're given that opportunity, handed it, do you choose the egregiously wrong thing to do, or do you actually have principles? I don't, you know, there's no way to know until you're confronted with these actual circumstances. Sorry if I derailed this there.
No, not at all. That was a fantastic take. And actually, I want to get more of your takes here. And I actually want to come more to some subjects close to your heart, because you tweeted recently, find something you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But they forget to mention it might take 20 plus years to figure out what you truly love. You are, as you mentioned a little while ago, 40 now, or maybe you're over 40, I'm not sure. I was wondering how much poker sort of still brightly burns for you, or has that maybe changed? Maybe in the short term, it sometimes burns stronger, and then in the long term, it fizzles out sometimes too?
Yes. To all of it, but I'll say this. I guess since I left Poker Stars in 2013, should we wait for Dara to get back? Since I left Poker Stars in 2013, I've been looking for a way to fit poker in my life that's, let's call it a plus EV hobby, something other than a profession or necessity to make money. And again, so that's like now coming on 7.5, 8 years, where I've been looking for this balance. And there's times when I feel like, I want to be playing poker the rest of my life, and I want to play with like a reasonable positive expectation and keep my game sharp. And then there's part of me that, like, sort of Marty Mathis helped define for me, where I could never play poker again and be okay with it. I remember having this conversation with Marty at the last World Series we played together. It was a Millionaire Maker event, let's say 3 or 4 years ago. And he was just like, no matter what, I would never stop playing, poker, like no matter how wealthy, no matter how this. And he's proven that basically completely. First of all, no matter how many scores he has, or no matter how much wealth he has built, it seems like he's still that same, like the grinder I knew from post Black Friday. It was like in Cabo, just playing 18 tables all day or whatever. And he's still just got that raw passion. And for me, it's almost like, if you paid me my perceived equity in the main event of the World Series, I could never play the main event of the World Series again. I would just show up and take people out to dinner, and that would be fine. It's not like so in a way, I lack that raw thing where it's like I want to beat the game or master the game, or like the game itself is so important. Like, no, I like more the social aspects and the sort of like unconventional, like mental freedom you get from playing poker for money. But yeah, it's a question I wrestle with, whether, and whether, I feel like I do have to bring enough passion and enough interest to it to play that plus EV part-time poker.
Well, when you were on the show before, you did mention that one of the things that you sort of found difficult, and I guess this makes sense because you've been, hot for poker and cold for poker at different points, is that to really get really good, you have to be all consumed in the game. You have to be in the lab, you have to be studying, you have to be playing loads to really stay sharp. It's like a muscle. I know that myself. There are times where I'm very much making content for a few weeks and I can feel my game, dulling. And then, there are times where I get a nice run of a month of online poker, and no question, by the second week, I'm feeling much better. So that's undoubtedly a thing, even for someone like me. And I think you're a bit more like me maybe than you are like Dara in this respect, where you do want to get into those other things, or maybe you're more likely to have second thoughts about poker altogether. I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, well, okay, so this is just also the ongoing debate. Dara, like when you get done with a 10-hour poker session, are you hitting the books? Are you doing calculations that night on what you did wrong and what you could do better the next time?
Oh, we don't have your mic, Dara. We don't have your mic.
Yeah, I think central to this whole thing is that what your motivation is, basically. And like you mentioned that you enjoyed the whole social thing around poker. That's true for a lot of people. A lot of people are in it just for the glory. And then, if they get the big score, they're done because they got that glory. For a lot of people, it's just money or whatever. For me, the main motivation has always been just sort of the interest in the game itself, trying to work out the strategy. And this has been true not just with poker, but every other game that I've played. The strategy is incredibly interesting to me. And that's what gets me excited. When I don't get upset when I lose a flip. I don't get upset when I bust a tournament. I don't get excited when I win a flip. And and the results don't really impress me that much either. What's far more interesting to me is when I have a spot where I'm not sure what to do, and then I can go off and actually run it afterwards and see exactly what to do. That's where I get the most pleasure from poker, learning something new, and seeing it.
I think there's no question that's the sort of ideal approach, right? Now the question is like, and I heard Doug say at the end of the post-game interview of one of these streams that like it's as simple as if you're not spending your time running these sims over and over again, you're kidding yourself that you might be improving. Now, if I believe that exactly, I would have to stop playing basically, because my thing is this basically. I find that when I study, like, okay, so if I play a 10-hour session, there's no way I'm hitting the lab afterwards. Or any session, it's like I'm vegging out somehow or another. I'm trying to decompress from the day. But I found that when I pay any attention to studying, and that might be just saving hand histories and doing a hand history review, it does improve my game. Or like the next time I'll play, I'll be playing better or more aware or more in the moment. And I'll be also incorporating new minor strategic things. Now that's far, far from being like in the lab and really like getting this pattern recognition down. So the question for me, or that I ask myself, is like, is the amount of, so-called work, because that really has always been my weak suit, has been doing the work and the study. It's not the most interesting thing to me at all. The question is, am I doing enough to stay like afloat in the game? It doesn't, I'm not trying to be the very best necessarily. But I want to be in a position to make runs and hit scores and play every hand very well. And that's just the open question for me, is am I doing enough work to accomplish that, or am I kidding myself, as Doug would suggest? And yeah, that's so, well, it remains to be seen. Well,
yeah, I really empathize with what you're saying there, because that's very much the way I think as well. Like I'd love to have these other interests, and I'd love for other things that I'm good at to take off and maybe become careers or that type of thing too. So I'm always a bit sort of like one toe out the door, if that makes sense. I always think of Dara as somebody who has had loads of different interests throughout his life, but every time he has one, I think you'll agree with this, Dara, I think it's something you actually said to me once, is that you're just all in for that thing. You just completely immerse yourself in that one game or that one pastime or that one obsession. And then maybe just one day you wake up and go, oh, I don't care about this anymore, or I've peaked at this, or it no longer interests me. And then you move on to the next one.
Yeah, I mean, the point of departure from all of my obsessions has always been when I feel that I've gone as far as I can go, not in terms of results, but just in terms of what I can learn or do. Like I reached a point in chess where I realized even if I study this for 20 hours a day for the rest of my life, I'm not going to get much better at this, and I'm not going to learn
So is poker the culmination of all your interests, and that you feel you're going to stick with this? Or, I mean, this has been your profession for decades now, yeah?
13 years. I started much later than most people. I started at the age of 42. But yeah, I think poker is perfect because it's such a big game. I can't imagine I'll ever reach that point where, I'll play a session and I won't have a spot afterwards and going like, I'm really not sure what I should do there. In fact, in the early days of poker, it was actually frustrating to me because, if you had a strange spot or a weird spot, all you could really do was ask your friends, ask the best poker players you knew. And you'd ask 5 people and you get 5 different answers. And then you had to decide who you believed the most, but there was no sort of provability. Now I feel that the solver is almost like the friend who proves to you what the result is. So you put in the inputs, you say, I think these are the ranges. I think these are the strategic options. What's the best one? And the solver actually with mathematical certainty comes back and says, this is best. And you can totally believe that. So once the solver era arrived, it actually reinvigorated my game because I felt I actually have somebody I can ask now that I trust that will always give me the right answer.
I think that's a major category of, like, we're talking about different things that interest people. And it turns out that the academic end of this is something that really interests a lot of people. And I mean, it's just to imagine like how big of a segment of the market is like, or the poker professional market is coaching. It would really be mind blowing to the generation of 20 plus years ago. Like there's no, this is a tangential thought, but to imagine that like Doyle Brunson would have like taken time out of his like gambling career to go like set up a gambling training academy. It's just, completely absurd. But now the best and most respected players in the game do exactly that. Can you guys give me 1 minute and chop it up while I go?
Yeah, no, you go take a comfort break there. That's no problem. Dara, I have a question for you anyway.
Yep.
So like a little bit of what we're talking about here, and this is another topic I do want to get Shane to weigh in when he gets back, is sort of poker players have this obsession, we're seeing it quite a lot right now actually, of making money. Money becomes this kind of like singular focus, and it's obviously impossible to disconnect poker from money because that's like the tools of the trade. So I get that, but there is something about maybe being a bit more academic like the way you are, or just being more at ease or content with making some money, making an okay money, but not being aspirationally trying to make all the money, do all the crypto, do all the investment stuff, and accumulate all the money and still be happy. I suppose happiness is the question I want to ask you about.
Yeah, I think in poker, like money is many things in poker. It's the tool of the trade. If you run out of money, well, particularly in the days before staking, if you run out of money, you're out of the game. So that was that was part of money. Money is the tool of the trade. Money is also the scoreboard. As soon as you win something, the first question people ask is, how much did you get for that? So it's that if you call our area sport, money is very much the scoreboard for that. But if money is your pure motivation, it gets harder because, one of two things will happen. You'll either make so much money that you don't need to make money anymore, and now your motivation is gone, or the game will get tougher and you'll find something else that you make more money at, and you'll go off and do that. So I think the people who are attracted by money tend to drop out of the game after a while. One of the things, and Shane touched on this earlier, was people who have kids and family. Like poker players, there was this old thing about you have to go bust to earn your spurs as a poker player. I never really had that luxury. I started at a time where I already had the wife and 3 kids, and I was their sole provider. So I never had the luxury of being able to go bust. Now, people have accused me of being a little bit too cautious in terms of not taking shots at the big stuff. But, it would have been very, very irresponsible of me to take those shots and risk actually going bust and then not being able to support my family anymore.
I heard directly to that. I mean, that is like an antiquated and irrelevant idea that I still hear some old school players like bring up. Like I hear players who let's say more like used to play the game. They'll be like, well, it's just like a known thing that every poker player is going to go bust. Like that is true for me, like personally, and that was true for some of the people I was coming up with. Like when I was coming up in like 04, 05, there was still a lot of that, like just raw degeneracy. Like where, like a little bit of that glamour and degeneracy where if it was 2005, 2006, and you had money at, in a World Series event, like you were going to hit the Baccarat table. That's, but the true, that's that mode of existing was rapidly going out the window, even in 2005, 2006. And, the best sort of friend of mine, best professional gambler friend of mine who I'm always referencing it was Jesse Martin, who, I think, way before he had kids, but he had the vision of what kind of life he wanted to build for himself. I think when he had a $30,000 bankroll, he had almost zero risk of ruin. Like he saw the big picture, and he would take shots. Like, he might put up the incorrect percentage of his bankroll technically in a 10K, but it was a very calculated shot. He knew he could go grind 10-20 limit or 2-4 no limit or whatever he became. And, I think that was the model that was quickly making the rest of us degenerates very like instantly irrelevant. So, right. I think, with Dara, like Dara is obviously a great example too of the irrelevant, that's just like, it's no longer a relevant notion that.
And I think we were sort of kindred.
You might have to go bust.
I think we were sort of kindred spirits on that stuff as well, because when we first met, it's well documented, Dara built up his roll and his poker empire from literally zero. It literally free rolls, spun all the way up. And I probably lost about maybe $1,500 in poker before I started winning money. And when I started as a professional, I was profitable 62 of my first 63 months. So I was playing super low variance, sit and go style, building it up slowly. Because in a very similar way to Dara, although I was younger, I was straight out of college. I didn't have any money in the bank, really, a little bit. And I did feel like, oh, if I do this, this is the alternative to a more normal career. And I have to prove that I don't go broke. Like going broke for me wouldn't have been the be all and end all, because maybe I would have had people I could borrow off. Maybe I could have just gone and got a job. I worked in a restaurant back then, so maybe I could have worked some shift, built up a role that way, and then gone back. So there were obviously options there. But for me, it would have not been possible, because had I gone broke at any point in the first at least 2.5 years, that would have been everyone around me going, what the fuck are you doing with your life, you idiot?
Well, so that represents you guys had a good foundation for it then. That was, that wasn't me. And there really is a thing that all the players like Dara, who sort of like took their first $50 deposit, the Jonathan Littles, who's like, I put in $50 and the next thing I knew I was cashing out 300K. Those people just, I think, were designed for the professional level of this game better. And some of us have had to learn those skills the hard way and rip through money. And I think for me, I spent a lot of time just living in a sort of fantasy land. Chasing short-term freedom. And I remember Jesse even saying, this is about long-term freedom. This is about stability. And it really, like again, Jesse Martin, he gave me the roadmap and the blueprint. And I just didn't have the sort of discipline at the time or the maturity to follow it. So I'm just, I'm aware of what my limitations were, what my setbacks were. And it's an attitudinal thing. And it's also just sort of like what your background is and what your work ethic is, or what, and I just indulged in the fantasy of just like winning satellites and chasing, going around the world, not really working too hard on my game ever, trying to play good, enjoying being in Monte Carlo or being in San Remo. Fucking, that was the life. Like it was, but right now I don't have any money. So, and Jesse's got like a ranch.
Well, blessed are the peacemakers. You're trying to find balance in our arguments with Daniel Negreanu. You're now comparing us to Jonathan Little and saying that we're cut from the same cloth. So I don't know what more you could really be doing as a guest now to try and repair all the broken relationship we have in the poker.
Oh, I didn't know you had a history with Jonathan Little. That wasn't intentional.
Don't worry.
I like everyone. Like although we did forget to mention Jonathan Little in the context of that, the Ivan cheating scandal, because that's what that reminded me of, which was sacrificing your sponsorship equity.
Yeah,
it's like it's like stealing from your employer is essentially like the dumbest thing you could ever do, because you're screwing up all your future possibilities at that place of employment and your references, and And again, I don't think, when we're talking about, I'm referring to the time when Jonathan Little was hired as a full tilt poker pro. And is this okay to discuss?
Please continue.
And famously, I don't know, whatever, he basically enlisted a factory of people to play a bunch of sit and go so he could get rake back way in excess. Which at the time the main takeaway, and I think it still is, because I don't think he's an unethical or amoral person, is that he lost his mind. Like to those full tilt deals were so insane. You were basically printing money just to be a break-even player, and then to feel like you had to scale that by like getting people to play while you were asleep or whatever the hell it was just so insane. And it's almost like hilariously insane the more I think about it now. That it correlates to that. It's the accidental ethical blindness. So maybe it is naivety. It's like, I just thought it might make sense to completely betray my corporate sponsor and risk my sponsorship.
Well, we're really grateful for that callback to 13 or 14 years ago in poker. We really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll get no emails about that one, Dara. That'll probably just be fine. I can't imagine that causing any trouble.
Water under the bridge. It's not like it's going to.
I'm not familiar enough with the culture of.
You've just thrown a grenade into our lives. It's fine, Shane. It's fine. Whatever.
Well, maybe you can hire that right, good. That high-priced editing team.
Yeah, we're going to have to make an EV calculation now, which is going to cost us less to take that out or to face the thing. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really good point on just how stupid poker players are on these stuff. Like, so many guys have lost their deals by virtue of doing something against their employer. Like, it's just insane. I mean, I worked in different industries before, and like, you'd occasionally see one of these people and everybody would go like, what an absolute idiot. But it just keeps happening in poker. I don't know what's wrong with poker players. I guess we have a very blinkered tunnel vision view of EV, and it's like, well, I'm making this much playing 8 hours a day. If I could play 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, I'd be making even more. How can I make that happen? Rather than thinking maybe people will notice that I'm grinding sit and goes while sleeping and also while being on a TV feature table. It's almost like an inability to see the big picture. And yeah, it's pretty remarkable. So, but we do keep seeing these people in poker. I mean, Deyra. But
again, and I will keep it. Like Jonathan Little has proven himself to be a very like smart guy, and another guy he's raised kids off of his poker money. So it's like that to me is the ultimate respect or tribute. But he's proven himself to be a thoughtful person, I think. I don't know what you got. I have no idea.
Yeah, and to be fair to Jonathan, he was very young at the time, and like a lot of us.
Yeah,
poker is one of those few industries where people can actually be at the top at an age when they're usually just the entry level clerk in every other industry.
Yeah, and it's also unique where it gives people, people in this industry are given unique opportunities to fuck up, to screw up, whether it's money. Look, and beyond the screwing up sponsorship deals, I'm sure you guys can think of like literally hundreds of instances of poker players making mistakes, doing like with other people's money, like doing things that were unethical or wrong for various reasons, but that don't necessarily
just to draw
entire character.
Just to draw a line on this one, because I'm petrified of legal retribution. I just want to clarify one point. As far as I'm aware, Jonathan Little has one kid, not kids, and that wasn't you suggesting, nor was it this show endorsing the notion that Jonathan perhaps has secret children somewhere that he's not aware. I just want to make absolutely clear. It's very important to make clear everything, I think, with this man.
Again, I'm lost in this conversation to some degree, but I think he's got 2 kids. And I don't know. I mean, maybe by the end of this, you guys will be big Jonathan Little fans, because it doesn't seem like that's the case right now.
Well, we conclude every episode since the new year with a Dara O'Kearney strategy tidbit. Dara, would you like to end the show in some strategic style for us?
Yeah, well, we've touched on this, that the thing I love about poker is trying to figure out strategy. So anytime there's a new variant that comes along, I'm usually one of the first people into it, trying to work out the strategy from first principles. The latest new variant on the scene is the GG Flip and Goes, which are similar to the old full tilt flip outs, if people remember those, and very few people do at this stage. But the idea is that you buy a certain number of chips between 1 to 10 stacks at the start. And then you put on a table where there are differing stacks, and everybody's forced all in until somebody has all the chips on the table, and then they're in the money, and it plays as a normal tournament. So that's the first twist they put on it, the fact that you can buy different numbers of stacks. The second twist is instead of everybody just being dealt 2 cards and it being run, everybody's dealt 3 cards and they have to do a discard, so pineapple style. And everybody can see each other's cards, so they can see what cards are missing. So this introduces an almost stud element to it, of like how many of my outs are out there. So this is the new format, and I put far more time than is probably should have into trying to work out the strategy. I'm going to start with 2 tidbits. First of all, there's a debate going on: should you buy 1 stack, which is clearly better from an ICM perspective, or should you buy 10 stacks? It still hasn't been definitively proven either way, but my very strong hunch at this moment is that 10 stacks is better. More stacks is better, which is perhaps good because Daniel is their main ambassador. More stacks is better for the simple reason there's a hand bonus. If you hit a straight, a 3-card straight, a 3-card flush, trips, or a straight flush, you get a bonus. And that's in relation to how many chips you bought in, not how many chips you have at that point. So at every point in the flip, you're getting a fairly significant jump in equity by having more chips. So yeah, that's again, I might change my mind on this. Initially, I thought one stack would be better for ICM reasons, but I do think the hand bonus thing trumps that. So if you're playing these flip and goes, I think I'm pretty sure the best thing to do is to buy 10 stacks.
Wait, what's the hand bonus thing? I missed that.
The hand bonus, basically, you're dealt 3 random cards, and if they're in sequence, so a 3-card straight, in other words, 5, 6, 7, you get a bonus of whatever amount of chips you bought. Your stack essentially doubles. If you hit a 3-card flush, you get a 2x bonus. If you hit trips, 7, 7, 7, you get a 3x.
They're actually adding an element of 3-card poker. Like 3-card poker is a casino game that has sort of those. Just
it's very.
It's more like.
But for example,
across 3-card poker, pineapple, the full tilt thing you mentioned. Were those you got 100 chips and it was like 5, 10 to start?
No, what they were literally just everybody. It was a tournament, but everybody was forced all in every hand until the money, and then it played as a normal tournament.
I vaguely remember something like that, but I thought it was just like a 100 chip thing that you still had the option of folding.
No, you had no option to fold in the original full tilt flip outs. So there was literally no skill in the flip out portion, which is probably why the format didn't survive.
This is much different than spin and go, right?
Yeah, this because it plays as a normal tournament once the initial phase is over, and there is also a skill component at the start. The skill component is deciding how many stacks to buy and deciding which card to discard.
So I had another. If I could ask another question about that, is it better to is another advantage to buying biggest stack that you can't lose the first hand to any smaller stack. First of all, you're
correct. So it's much more likely you're going to get to a second flip, and because there's a hand bonus on that second flip, that essentially adds a serious amount to your equity. I believe the bonus is worth roughly 15% of your buy-in. So if you buy 10 stacks, you're guaranteed obviously the first flip, as everybody is. So that's 15%. But most of the time you'll get to a second flip as well, and that adds another 15% in expectation. And you may often it takes 4 or 5 flips for somebody to amass all the chips. So if you're in 5 flips, you have 5 potential chances to win the hand bonus.
So it's possible the person buying in for the single stack is at a huge disadvantage?
It is possible, yeah. Also, another thing I didn't realize initially was that I thought, I ran some ICM sims which proved that if you were on a table with more chips, you were at a disadvantage, because when you got to the cash phase, yes, you had more chips, but you had paid more for those chips essentially, or the table had paid more, and they were worth less per chip. But what I didn't know and what GG didn't particularly publicize was that they balanced the tables. So every table has roughly the same amount of chips. So if you buy a 10K stack, you'll be one of maybe the only 10K stack, maybe there'll be 2 10K stacks per table, but you'll be one of them. And if you buy a 1K stack, you'll always face the same number of 10K stacks. So that sort of mitigates the ICM.
Great stuff. Well, no better man than Dara Carney to go back to first principles and start figuring out a new game once it's been invented. Speaking of new games, or at least newish games, Dara, we're going to finish off by just saying the Unibet Winter PKO series is in full swing at the moment. And on Sunday, we have our main event. It's just a €100 buy-in, so it's very attainable for anybody. There's lots of satellites, big satellite tree all the way from probably €1, I'm guessing. So you can easily get into that one. I'm expecting quite a big turnout for this one. I think we might get 300-400 people. Dara, how's that series been going for you? And what do you think of the idea of us having this dedicated PKO series with a PKO leaderboard where it's actually all about the knockouts and not about where you finish?
I think it's a brilliant idea. I think the leaderboard really adds an extra dimension. And there's, apart from the prizes you can win, there's also a free roll that you can get into if you get more than 30 knockouts. So that's making people chase knockouts. The whole joy of PKOs is that it encourages a Gambia style rather than, say, satellites, which encourages people to fold absolutely everything. The series has been an absolutely massive success. And it's interesting because Unibet was one of the few sites where less people were playing PKOs than on other sites, but this has really sort of ignited the player pool on Unibet, and they've fully gotten into PKOs now, and I think we're going to see that'll continue even after the series. You may have noticed I'm occasionally glancing down at my screen because I've committed to playing the entire series, and the latest event has already started. And David, I've noticed you glancing down too, so I suspect you might be playing as well at the same time. But yeah, it's been a huge success, and I think the idea to have a leaderboard based not on how you finished in the tournaments but on knockouts was a great idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea. And it is, as you say, Dara, absolutely exploding. We are giving away loads of your books. I don't know how many, but I think there was an order of almost 150 books. PKO Poker Strategy by Dara O'Kearney and Barry Carter being given away to people who get lots of knockouts, to people who don't get enough knockouts. I don't know how we're doing it, but there are a shitload of books being given away this week. Dara O'Kearney, thank you as always. Shane Shaniak Schleger, you've been an absolute legend here with us today. It's so interesting to get your thoughts on all these topics, and of course spend a little bit of time just like mulling life, really, I suppose, as we did in the last half hour.
Well, thank you. Thanks for saying so, and really thanks a lot for having me. It was nice, really fun talking to you guys. Got me laughing a couple times. Got some good stuff out there, I hope. Hopefully.
Well, you probably got us sued, so thanks for that. Dara O'Kearney, Schleger, thank you so much. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks, Shane.
All right, thanks, guys.